Let's jump right in. We hear a ton about the invisible hand of the market, right? The whole idea that buyers and sellers just doing their own thing and acting in their own self-interest will magically create the absolute best outcome for society. But what happens when that hand breaks? Today, in this explainer, we're diving into the incredibly messy, kind of fascinating world of market failures and looking at why some pretty massive problems just keep sticking around, all because of blind spots in our economic system. Here's our roadmap for today. We are going to look at when markets fail, understand externalities, explore some solutions, break down the four types of goods, and finally, tackle the free rider problem. Let's get to it. But before we get deep into the economic weeds, I want you to think about something. Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, man, I really want to breathe some smog today, or I sure hope my local river turns toxic, right? Absolutely no one wants that. Yet pollution is everywhere. So why does it happen? Well, the answer actually exposes a huge flaw in how our individual decisions ripple out and impact society. Moving right along to Section 1, when markets fail. The core idea here is that sometimes buyers and sellers acting entirely in their own best interests accidentally create just terrible outcomes for everyone else. When a market is firing on all cylinders, prices perfectly reflect the true value and cost of things. But when our individual choices, like, say, driving a massive gas-guzzling car just to save a few minutes on a commute, start stacking up, that invisible hand actually pushes things right off a cliff. It ends up creating an outcome that literally nobody asked for. So the really crucial takeaway is that a market failure is basically a giant blind spot. The market is completely ignoring the innocent bystanders. It's a setup where the classic forces of demand and supply are walking around with blinders on. They only care about the immediate buyer and the immediate seller, and they totally fail to factor in all the wider costs and benefits that are rippling out into the community. And because of that blind spot, the market just fails to give us an optimal result. Okay, on to Section 2, understanding externalities. Let's give this failure a proper name. Economists call these bystander effects externalities, and that really just means a third party is either paying a steep price or getting a sweet perk from a transaction they had absolutely nothing to do with. You see, private costs and benefits are felt only by the people making the trade, but an externality? That spills over onto everyone else. If there are externalities in play, it literally means the people deciding what to buy and sell just aren't looking at the full picture. Now, there's a huge difference between a negative externality, which drags society down with extra costs, and a positive externality, which actually gives society a boost. Think about it. If you choose to drive during rush hour, your private cost is the gas you burn, right? But your negative externality is the traffic congestion that makes everyone else late. On the flip side, getting a vaccine benefits you privately because you don't get sick, but the positive externality is that you're also protecting the vulnerable people around you. Let's zoom in a bit on those negative externalities. Imagine a massive steel plant. It totally benefits the owner, who's making a nice profit, and it benefits the construction companies getting cheap steel to build skyscrapers. But the people living in the neighborhood next door, they are bearing a heavy, completely uncompensated cost. The smoke in their air, the potential health issues, their property values dropping, those are the negative externalities. The market price of a steel beam definitely doesn't include the asthma inhalers the neighbors are suddenly having to buy. To put it in economic terms, the factory owner is only looking at their private cost, the materials, the labor, the electricity. But society carries the social cost, which takes those private costs and adds the heavy burden of the pollution right on top. Because the market is only charging the buyer for that smaller private cost, the steel is technically way too cheap. And what happens when things are too cheap, we end up producing way, way too much of a bad thing. So how in the world do we fix this broken, invisible hand? Let's jump into Section 3, Solutions to Externalities. Because private markets completely struggle to sort this out on their own, the government has to step in with a specific toolkit. They need to force the market to internalize these outside costs. And they generally do this using three main approaches: slapping a tax on the problem, commanding behavior through strict regulation, or creating a brand new market entirely with tradable permits. Let's look at the first two. They can use a pollution tax, which means directly charging the firm the exact dollar amount it takes to clean up the mess they just made. Suddenly, pollution isn't just some free byproduct anymore. It hits the company right in the wallet. The second option is a command approach. That's just straight up regulation. The government steps in and says, you have to stop polluting, period. Or, for a positive externality, they might say kids absolutely have to be vaccinated to go to public school. Simple, direct commands. But then there's the third option, marketable pollution permits. And this one is genuinely brilliant. The government sets a hard cap on the total acceptable amount of pollution for the entire year and hands out permits. But here's the genius part. It beautifully incentivizes going green. Because if you figure out a clever way to run your factory really clean, you don't just save money. You can literally sell your leftover pollution rights to a dirtier competitor for a profit. It basically turns environmental innovation into a massive financial reward. How cool is that? Moving to section 4, 4 types of goods. Because we have to ask, what happens with things in our world that nobody actually owns? To really get why this breaks the market, we need to understand 2 key properties of the things we buy and use. The first is excludability. Basically, can we physically or legally stop someone from accessing a good if they refuse to pay for it? Think about setting up a toll booth on a highway or slapping a password on your home Wi-Fi network. If you can block a non-payer from using it, the good is excludable. The second property is rivalry, and this just means if I use the thing, is there physically less of it left for you? The classic, relatable example is an ice cream cone. If I eat it, well, it's gone. No matter how much money you have or how badly you want it, you can't have my ice cream cone. My use totally diminishes your use. That makes it a rival good. So if we cross those 2 properties, excludability and rivalry, we can basically sort everything in our entire economy into a neat little matrix of 4 categories. We've got private goods, which are both excludable and rival, like the clothes you're wearing right now. Then there are common resources, rival but not excludable. Think of fish in the open ocean. Anyone can drop a line, but every fish I catch is one less fish for you. Then we have natural monopolies, which are excludable but not rival, like your cable TV. And finally, public goods, which are neither excludable nor rival, things like national defense. And that brings us to our final section, the free rider problem. Let's see why the market absolutely hates producing those public goods we just talked about. Let's use a lighthouse as our perfect example. A lighthouse is the ultimate pure public good. First off, it's totally non-excludable. The lighthouse keeper can't exactly run out and cover the light every time a ship sails by that hasn't paid their monthly subscription fee, right? And second, it's non-rival. One ship using that beam of light to safely navigate the rocks doesn't dim the light even one tiny bit for the very next ship coming along. It provides immense, life-saving value to society, but you can't gatekeep it. But here's the catch. This setup creates the infamous free rider problem. A free rider is someone who gets all the benefits of a good but completely dodges paying for it. Because think about it, since you can't exclude anyone from the benefits of a lighthouse or military defense or a public streetlight, a totally rational person might just decide to keep their wallet closed. They'll think, hey, I'll just wait for my neighbor to fit the bill for the streetlight and then I'll just walk under it for free. And because everyone is secretly thinking the exact same thing, private companies look at that and say, no way, we aren't building these. Since the private market completely faceplants here, the invisible hand is totally useless. The government absolutely has to step in. They run the numbers, and if they decide that the overall societal benefits of a public good far outweigh the costs of building it, they step up and provide it. How do they solve the free rider problem? By forcing everyone to pitch in through combined tax revenue. That way, nobody gets a free ride, and we all get to enjoy uncongested roads, a secure nation, and brightly lit streets. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a question. Knowing what you know now about the invisible hand, about these major market failures, and the massive rippling effects of externalities, how are your daily choices impacting the bystanders around you? Are you unknowingly leaving behind a trail of hidden costs, or are you actually generating positive benefits for your community? The market might be blind to these effects, but now you certainly aren't. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and keep questioning the hidden forces that shape our world.